Our evolving message. Yesterday I talked about the history of Rise, me first getting to work in the fitness industry, going on to set up what became Rise and what's happened in the decade since. And in today's video I want to talk about our evolving message, how that has changed to some degree over the last few years, particularly in relation to the food side of things. Because longer term members will remember and have commented on occasion about how we used to talk more about what we call JERF, just eat real food, and about the impact of various decisions on our hormones and the impact that had on our achievement of our results. And the reason we used to talk a lot more about that is because I, and really the fitness industry as a whole, was a lot more kind of there with that sort of stuff around that time. I first went on Charles Poliquin's biosignature modulation course in September 2011, and my mind was somewhat blown by the vast amount of information there and how I felt all this knowledge about what happens in the body could really massively benefit my clients. And for the next few years, we put a lot of that information out there. However, I soon came to realise that whilst that information wasn't necessarily wrong, it, for the vast majority of people, was nowhere near their biggest win, and for many people just made what we were talking about too confusing, maybe too much something they just didn't feel they could do. Even something as simple as just eating real food, eating fresh, natural ingredients, people often felt they couldn't do it. They felt that that wasn't a life they were willing to live or couldn't logistically make work. So whilst we had a number of great successors, some of whom are still with us, for whom that worked amazingly well, as the only one really who has a full oversight of absolutely everything that happens in the business and where all the members are at, I became aware that that message just wasn't working for an amount of people. And I also became more and more aware of the fitness industry talking less and less about things like hormones and more about what had almost become a little bit old-fashioned prior to that, which was calories. As more and more research came out to show that despite hormones being a consideration, that fundamentally that calorie deficit was still underpinning it. If anything, hormones and other things, food choices, etc., might make a few of the numbers within that equation marginally different. That might make it harder or easier to make that equation balance, but it doesn't stop the equation being a thing. It didn't stop that weight loss only occurs when we're in a calorie deficit and that we gain weight in a calorie surplus. So I started to change the message that we put out there to people, and I find that it works better for the majority of people who come to us. It's a simple message, not always easy, but we almost can't go wrong with it. If we get ourselves in a calorie deficit, that doesn't mean that's the entirety of everything we might ever want to consider with eating. It doesn't automatically mean it's the healthiest possible lifestyle, but very few people who come to us are looking for the healthiest possible lifestyle. They're looking for some changes that they feel they can make, are willing to make, and will do on average for long enough to get to and then maintain their particular results. So that, in short, is why we changed that side of the message. From an exercise side, I think we've fundamentally kept the same basic concept. We've evolved and improved what we do. But for me, it's always about being willing to do a knowingly suboptimal exercise approach that we find enjoyable or at the very least tolerable and therefore do. To me, the majority of the fitness industry gets too hung up on this perfect version of a workout, which is fantastic if we're training for the Olympics. But for the vast majority of people, they find it boring and a slog and don't come back to doing it on any regular basis. So in short, that is the reasoning behind our evolving message over the last 10 years.